we are evaluating nuclear if we are forced to close down Colstrip, so it's gonna be one or the other. Our plan is to operate Colstrip for as long as we can, but if we're forced to close Colstrip, this is our backup.
Okay, so third question, where you already have these plants, has there been a change in cancer rates in the communities around these plants?
Around the existing,
Not the ones that you already have. None. You're sure about that?
so, yes, I am. Part of the problem though is there are many things that cause cancer. And so causality is, having confidence that the nuclear power plant caused cancer is a difficult thing. And the reason I'm confident is because the radiation levels are contained to the staff at the plant, and we have very strict administrative limits on, you will get more radiation exposure in community, on airplanes and things like that than you do working at a nuclear power station or living next to one.
Are there studies or research that you can say for, like, you've made a few statements about it's safer and no, and I'm confident about this. Are there studies that you can send us and send us whoever is the connection here that you might back that up? Sure. Okay, thank you.
We had a question in the back, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about the consultation with the Northern Cheyenne Tribe on a government-to-government basis, and whether or not that has occurred and what those sort of talks or meetings have been. Because you probably are familiar that the Northern Cheyenne Tribe was successful in suing for damages with the with unlawful decreases in air quality. So I'm wondering what that kind of consultation is looking like for this project, and if it has occurred, and any concerns that have been brought to that community as well, especially when you're considering the use of water that expands beyond the 18-mile radius of this project, or the 20-mile radius, and what kind of community involvement is happening.
So we does have permission to engage with the Northern Cheyenne Tribe. It is something that we have to navigate carefully as a nation-to-nation discussion, and we want to understand all the questions that you have so that I can make sure to bring all of the experts and analysis that's helpful to for that conversation. We have not set that up as of yet. I'm suspecting that this fine lady in the front might be the person I need to talk to.
In all your research about the water, how far, should something happen and it gets into the Yellowstone, how far will it go for damages and for radiation and for all the cancer and all the nightmares?
So we've only had, so it's a rare situation where we've had existing nuclear power plants that have leaked into the groundwater. There's been two plants that have had that challenge.
But should it happen here, how far down Yellowstone and River out, how far will it go?
I'm guessing what she's trying to say is you've looked at scenarios already.
In your
Well,
research,
what is it
yeah.
for?
So I feel like I'm saying this a lot, but accident scenarios are based on the designs of the reactors, and because these designs are in flux, not all of them have, you have to design the core first and then you consider the different accident scenarios. So until they,
This one that would,
pardon me?
the design of the one that would be here is.
There's no
They don't know which
technology,
one's gonna be here yet.
Okay.
there's no technology that's been selected
No
for here,
research
but
on the damages.
we can look at the designs that are being considered and we have accident scenarios for, and we can share with you, at this point in time, accident scenarios and emergency planning zones are expected to be at site boundaries, so any consequence would be contained to the site itself.
But I'm sure that since we've been this far along in progression, since the bill has passed, since all of this, I'm sure this is not your first meeting, regarding this, I'm sure you have an idea of the kind of design you would like here, right?
So, I'm just a scientist from IML, this is the gentleman from Northwestern, and the developers are not in a place to choose a design yet for the utility. So what we did was take the first step. The question was, is it feasible? When you site a nuclear power plant, there are some things that prevent you from building it. Seismic, flooding, slope, those types of things.
I heard that last night, but since we're already so far in this game here with the bill passing, in less than 10 days, if he doesn't sign it, it's going to become a law. And so then the cart is already moving, and I'm sure that you've already selected, since the cart is already in motion, I'm sure that the design has already been kind of, you have an ideal design.
To clarify the bill, okay, all we did was say, we are willing in this state to address our spent nuclear fuel. That's all the bill says. Not anybody else's, just ours on site. It's one of the steps of the 100 steps you guys brought up the other night. This is just putting on notice to the NRC that Montana says we will take care of addressing our spent nuclear fuel. That's all the bill does.
But it seems to me that, these things kind of would have been first, prior to organizing and
No.
publishing and getting any of this other stuff,
That does make sense.
No, because you have to send out the signal to the NRC that says, okay, we can move to the next step in the 100-step process, or how many I think actually there are. And so all that is one of the first steps that says, all right, we can move forward. If that hadn't passed, then it says to Northwestern, it's not an option, go to South Dakota.
It just kind of seems like we're doing things a bit backwards here, where we pass
Not at
legislation
all.
and then come to the community,
Not at all.
So a lot of states are proactively passing legislation to support the development of nuclear. And depending upon that state, that legislation can look very differently. We've seen, feasibility studies, we've seen all sorts of things. We're seeing states pass financial incentives because they want to attract nuclear to their state. But it's really up to, between the energy offices and the state legislators, they're trying to provide power. And it's difficult for a utility to commit to something when they see, when there's a law that blocks them from considering the technology. So to even be able to consider nuclear, they have to have confidence that they can handle the waste. And currently, that has to be handled adjacent to the plant.
I don't think you'd want to pick your design. Because if you were to build a nuclear power plant in Montana, you're looking 10, 15 years down the road. You wouldn't pick a design now, you would let the next 10 or 15 years of technology be incorporated into the design you build.
So with all these other designs, have you guys done the research of, like some design gonna be here? What is the research for that? Or another design gonna be here, what is the research for that?
That will all be part of the process.
And the answer is yes. That's what I talked about in the slide last night. We started, there's 129 different technical vendors out there. They all got their own, and we're trying to work through and see which one's the best one that fits with all of it.
What is the best one that fits with this one?
That's what
We
we're
don't know.
evaluating.
Two of them.
Okay, I think that moving ahead and kind of catching up with the little bit of the background of your project here that we're talking about, okay, for Colstrip. I think that there's a lot of us that didn't know that you have a meeting here every year and the tribal council has always been invited and there hasn't been a whole lot of response. That's why a lot of us didn't know about this. Now, we're just slowly catching up, and you've already been meeting for 20 years, okay? And is that the Energy Open or whatever it is, you've been here for quite some time for that. That is a good resource for us. It's, you know, we're just not coming aware of what we can participate in. And in the fact that the tribe could invite this group here to come down there and meet with us and educate even more people. There should be a lot more of us here from the tribe listening in, okay? And I think that it would be beneficial to all of us parties if Idaho, if you could come down to the tribe, be invited, come and give your presentations there and answer these questions. So this thing here with Colstrip, you know, they wanna keep it running, and we have, on this side, they wanna shut coal plants down because of the CO2, or the carbon, right? Okay, now we have a 2-year extension, we can make more power for 2 more years. Okay, we're not gonna run Colstrip and a nuclear plant at the same time. Okay, the misconception is it's gonna turn into like another Chernobyl. It's not, because the reactors are not gonna be that big. I live in Florida and we have, Turkey Point, south of Miami. And that's within a 26-mile radius of where I live. And there's a lot of information out there about the times they test, when they're gonna go into, changing out the fuel and stuff. Okay, that's all public information and it's by law, right? So these are the things that could help ease, I think, the misconceptions that sometimes we feel, or we hear things and it scares us because we're not familiar with nuclear. When this station was built, it was built on the premises it was always gonna burn coal, okay? And so now to bring the nuclear, that's like, okay, they're gonna build a big reactor here, and it's gonna be like Chernobyl or 3 Mile or whatever, right? And I don't see that, but I think that there's a lot of people that don't understand where we're at this point. That this is just information gathering, that this is a public comment, we have questions, and it happens to be in Colstrip, and we're here, which brings us to this point. I think that with the information, is having another, you know, be invited down there, and if you could come and whatnot, I think that would be a starting point.
Actually, part of what I've talked to Representative Sooktis about as well when we were still up in session was, I wanna try to do a tour of all of the tribes. Not just the Northern Cheyenne. Go to all of the tribes with the folks from INL to provide that kind of information. And I think a lot of the misconceptions are based on way old information, things that happened 50 years ago. And people need to be brought up on exactly what's going on now, what the safety levels are and everything, but it doesn't mean that you guys should have to come here. I'm trying to set up a tour where we can go to every one of the tribes and provide that information that you're looking for, so.
Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge, love you, Gary, you know that.
I know.
But it might be helpful for us to go alone too. For them to have a conversation directly with INL.
That's fine.
Maybe love this guy here too, but maybe without Northwestern, we're open to that. Our job at GAIN is to help people that are investigating nuclear energy find the information they need. And our job as scientists is to bring you facts to the best of our ability, whatever that question might be. And we're committed to doing that. This was a research project funded by my group. This was not funded by Northwestern. As I have been working and looking at an energy transition, and I think about the opportunity we have to build a new generating system in this country, I think it's important to consider all technologies and the pros and the cons, and also to make sure that everyone is involved in that decision. We were invited here, Colstrip, and this is the largest baseload unit in Montana. And without this power, it creates a significant challenge in the state. And where we're headed going forward with states around, and I think this is something Brian talked to last night, you may not be able to import the power you need in the future because demand is going up everywhere. And so trying to balance all of those factors is a bit of a challenge, and we can share with you what we know about demand going up, where people are adding generation. Is there an opportunity to import power instead of building it for yourself? Be more than happy to do our best to answer all of those questions. I can bring wind and solar friends. We don't have to just talk about nuclear. We can bring wind and solar friends that can talk about where we are with batteries and things like that. And
which we do that at INL.
yeah.
And the other thing is, INL is a beautiful 7-hour drive from here. And we'd love to host tours at the lab to see all the capabilities behind the solar research that we do, and the battery storage research, and the biofuel research that we do, and the nuclear research, which you can actually go out to the advanced test reactor and stand right next to the reactor and look at where the fuel from that reactor is stored in the pools and see it with your own eyes. And it's a really, like, I'm not an engineer, and I'm an economist, and it's been a 3 years of learning curve for me to understand all of the technology and safety and the things behind nuclear. It's not something that happens overnight, and it takes patience it took a lot of patience on my side to learn some of the things that we talk about today.
And the cool thing, the cool thing, you go in there, when you walk in, you put your hands in this deal so they test you. You put your feet in this deal so they test you. You're there for an hour, 2 hours, you walk out, you put your hands in the deal, they test you, put your feet in to make sure that you don't have any contamination whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's impressive, the levels that they take and how little exposure there is, virtually
So
nothing.
sensitive that if you wear the wrong kind of pants, it could set the machine off
Yeah.
just because of the static on your pants.
If you did a tour, we do
Don't
highly
wear
recommend
rayon
cotton.
pants.
Highly recommend cotton. Synthetic materials, radon like this, hang on to.
Whereas I was not concerned originally about this bill, I mean, you know, the tribal consultation, the voter consultation is all that I was interested in making sure happens, because you
Yes.
said it's not gonna happen now, it might not happen in 5 years, but what about 10 years down the road? Are you guys gonna still hold the same commitment to those voters?
Sure.
I mean, we both might not be here in 10 years, you know?
Oh, I
You know,
definitely
but
will.
yours, but besides, you know, that's not the point though. The bill doesn't have the tribal or the voter consultation on it. That was what I was interested in. And that was
You
why
didn't have this consultation, you
But
had
that
it
was
as
why I
permission.
offered to bring education into our tribe, because I do know some of these things are scary. And I do want to make sure that, you know, the people understand these things, and like even myself, you know, I'm not opposed to the actual, what you guys are, you know, but just to have the voter input is where I'm concerned. Is it gonna still be there in 10 years? There's nothing that's written in any kind of commitment that it got stripped. So there's no guarantee that anybody will hold that commitment. That is my
So-
major concern.
Okay, so I'm gonna come to Molly in just a minute. When a utility applies for a construction permit for a facility, there is a requirement for public engagement on that project. It is a federal requirement, and it will not change.
Because it's a lot at stake here, and
Yes.
I understand, everybody understands that,
And
and we should
I'd be
all our
happy
voices
to,
should be considered.
yeah, I'd be happy to walk through what is federally required for that. I have made a promise to Molly, she's been patient. Go ahead.
So I would just like to say, personally, I do work for Northwest Energy, but I grew up, I was raised here, we have not made any decisions. And I feel sad that you guys think you're late to the game, because we are not, the game really hasn't started. That's why we are having this.
Right.
And that's why we wanna know where to come to, and I'm so glad the game is gonna go down to Lame Deer. Hopefully we can hit some other places. You're not late to the game, that's why we're doing this, and we appreciate every single one of your comments, and we're writing them down, and that's why we brought on, we're working with Gain so closely, because they're gonna go back, and they're the ones who have the time and dedication to answer some of these questions. And like they said ahead, like, the legislation is not just, like, we're not the only ones looking at these options. There's other entities coming into the state. We're just part of the game, but we wanna, instead of just come in and do it, we wanna kind of learn from past mistakes, and we wanna hear community input. We wanna be part of the community. That's what we're doing. We literally, I know everybody keeps saying your plan, we're not there yet. We just wanna have the discussion so that when the state of Montana is in a crisis of, do you feed your kids or do you pay your power bill, we can step in and provide power for our customers. We're only looking at these options. We're looking at solar, we're looking at wind, we're looking at more hydro, pump hydro. There's technologies that we're not even discussing here. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to talk about some of the opportunities we're looking into. Our biggest thing is, not only are we learning from nuclear's past, but we're learning how, as a utility and as a servant of power to our customers, how do we serve you guys better? So, like I said, we are at the baby steps, and that's why we're bringing you in now. We have not made decisions. We want input, and we want questions like this so that when we move forward, we can make the best decision not only for our customers, but our neighbors, relatives, that are still here and stuff. So I really appreciate everybody who came, and I honestly think this is gonna be the first of many meetings. And when you say, what's gonna be happening after 10 years, hopefully I'll be getting closer to retirement, but I'll probably still be here. I find a way back to Colstrip every chance I can, and it's something that's very special to my heart, and it's in my family, and I too, I want good jobs, I want to keep the lights on for people, I want great environment, and it's that balance. But in order to have that balance, we need to have that discussion, and we need to have those conversations before we move forward. And I hope you guys realize this is us not coming at you saying we're just gonna do this. It's us saying, hey, in the next 10, 15 years, this is an option that people are moving to. We're gonna watch those people. We're gonna watch the nuclear reactors that are being built. We're gonna talk to the experts, and we're gonna learn and try to do the best for when we have to make that decision. That's the main point of this and what we're working with Jade.
Thank you for saying that.
Also, why we don't have all the answers to your
Yeah, and we don't have the answers
questions.
to
We are at the very beginning.
We don't know what we're.
This gentleman right back here's had his hand up for quite a while.
Too long. No, I would also, Molly tried to steal all my thunder, but I've also lived in this community for 55 years. I have a ton of good friends. I see golfing friends in here. I see basketball friends in here. I see commissioners in here. And there's a lot of people at the Energy Open last year, and the CEO of Northwestern Energy saved our butts, or we'd all be paying bigger taxes. We have to come up with solutions to the problems that are gonna face all of us. I wanna thank these folks for one thing. I actually got to run an R&D plant here, a research and development plant. We took the coal from 8,400 BTUs to 12,400 BTUs and did a whole bunch of stuff to turn the plant completely commercial. There was 15 operations in the United States at the time that the DOE authorized, okay? We're the only plant, because of a lot of Northern Cheyenne and a lot of people from Colstrip working together to run that plant. Some of them are your relatives, the people I see in this room, okay? My name is Jonah Bejo, if you don't know me, but I'm very passionate about this town. Everybody knows that. I'm not always the most popular guy in town either. But at the end of the day, if we take the coal, we watch 1 and 2 go away, we watch Barrett go away, we watch the sugar factory go away, as we watch everything, they're going away, okay? They're going, at some point, I won't be alive here to see it, okay? Most of us won't. So there's a lot of development, a lot of work to do before they ever get to that point. I got to come to Colstrip before they built the plant. We built all the street, we built the interstate from Forsyth to Hysham. They hired us to come down here to do that. I thought they were gonna grow roses. I had no idea what a steam plant is. They like to work, they called me back, I went to work and we did all the startup on all the plants. The material handling side of things. We, the Northern Cheyenne and Colstrip, I agree with you folks, we do not talk enough to each other. We just don't. That needs to change. We could be one big happy family if we wanted to be, and we should be. But at the end of the day, if we get rid of the coal, and the coal's gone away, okay, what other sources do we got? That's gonna do this for the future. If we don't do all the R&D and everything that's here, we gotta have energy. And that's why the water is extremely important. I think it needs to, you can't design anything if you don't design around the water. You can probably come up with that answer, and I know I'm taking a lot of time, but at the end of the day, Bill Parker over there wants to say something, so I'm gonna yield to Bill Parker.
Yeah, I hope you're assuming it might be wise, but maybe not. I appreciate the people here offering to give us the facts, no matter if there is a side involved in it or not, giving us the facts. I appreciate that, because in today's world, it's tough to say, okay, everything you see on Facebook is true, right? Everybody? Okay. We have a president who just told us that eggs and gas just dropped by, I don't know, quote me here, you guys, 70%? 80%?
84.
Excuse me? Be careful what you're told. Is the CEO Northwestern here? I'm sorry, from here I can't see.
No.
Oh, man.
That is not my title.
Okay. The op-ed that he presented yesterday, and it reads something like, Colstrip is the worst in, I don't know, the country or the world.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, be careful, everybody, what you see in print from some people. I'm not the expert, but one of my family tested for the Northern Cheyenne Tribe the air quality of Colstrip's emissions. I don't know, for over a decade. And I'm only as good as what I'm told, but he says if there was a time that Colstrip failed or came close, the power plant reacted as immediately as they possibly could and corrected it. That's his words, and unfortunately he passed away, but those were his words to our family defending the coal emissions. In fact, he said it was extremely rare that they came close to not passing the air quality standards. The tribe is really concerned about that, you guys. Please don't underestimate, and I don't speak for the tribe for God's sake, but the earth is sacred, and it should be. We don't need to be killing our people or anything like that. So safety, anything you guys can provide facts for safety is important. Everybody, be careful on no matter what side, on what you hear, you know, really try and search out the fact. And as long as you let me talk, at some point, I'd like you guys to consider, when you say that we have the infrastructure, I'm an educator. I haven't seen anything, at least so far, and maybe I've missed it, where anything on the educational system has been considered. For me, as a tribal member, it's important because lately the Colstrip School Board is looking at denying tribal members to go to school here. And right now, to the best of my knowledge, over 40% of the students in the Colstrip public school system are from, guess where? From the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, folks. So a huge amount of money comes through the state and through federal impact dollars, but also we're sending wonderful kids and wonderful families. And so at some point, I'd like to see that educational system considered in the infrastructure. Because I think it's important to workers coming in, it's important to Northern Cheyenne people, and important to Colstrip.
Actually, I'm glad you bring up that point, because when we talk about workforce development, you know, we talked last night about the workers at the Colstrip station today. We've looked at workforce transition and the similarities of the jobs they do today and the jobs they might do in a nuclear power station. But the reality is, if you think about building something 15 to 20 years from now, where are those workers today? Preschool. They're in preschool or not born yet. And so it is important, and generally, we don't do a good job talking about energy in our science classes across the nation. It's hit or miss what's taught. We do have material, across the Department of Energy to talk about all energy sources. We'd be glad to help with that education. We work in other states, helping to develop community college, curriculum as well. We're working in Kentucky and Tennessee on some of those things. But yeah, you're absolutely right on the education piece. Some of these decisions are gonna be made by folks involved in the in community now, but the people that are going to operate anything that we build are our children, are the children of this community. Let's have his hand up.
So, my question is for you specifically. You're looking at putting this here in Colstrip, I understand, because of the electrical infrastructure. What other sites are you looking at in Montana to include Billings, Bozeman, and Helena?
What was the first part?
What other sites are you looking at? Or is this the only site you're
Other
looking at?
sites,
for the
we're
bigger
primarily looking, we are looking at other areas too, but we are focused in Colstrip. We're looking, Broadview's a great one, outside of Billings, cause you got access to the 500. Primarily in those two, we're also looking at areas just DDGS over by Anaconda, Eyeball and stuff like that. We haven't gotten into them. We're not as far into any of those as we are here in Colstrip, on this one. And to kinda answer your question, I don't know if this answers your question or not, but one piece of education I think that's very important for people to get, that we're not even talking about here, and it's how the grid operates. The one gentleman, I think he walked out the door, but he talked about, we gotta have a source, right? We're always talking about source and where you put that source. But if you don't have a good understanding on how the grid operates, it doesn't matter where that source is, you're gonna have issues. We can go put up windmills, and when the wind doesn't blow, you just import it, right? There's 4 paths into the state of Montana. WEC calls them paths 8, 18, 80, and 83. They're pretty maxed out. So if you're sitting at a very cold day in January, and those pathways are full up, and you don't have the resource right here in the state, how are you getting that energy out on the grid? Where's it coming from? Those lines are full. So energy infrastructure is every bit as important as the actual source, the supply that you're looking at as well. So when you're getting educated on those things, if you get the chance, I'm an engineer by background, and I always quote this, and I shouldn't quote it because I don't know what magazine it came from, but they'll tell you that the electrical grid is the most complex machine that man has ever built. You think about an electron getting generated here in Colstrip, it's going through a light bulb in Missoula at about the speed of light. Instantly. It's going through there, and it all has to work, and it all has to match up, and it all has to come together. Brian hit on it briefly about it, and he started getting, I think he was channeling his inner engineer when he started talking inertia and stuff like that, but it goes in the blink of time. And we got intermittent resources. You got a cloud that goes over top of a solar panel, that load drops, and you gotta be able to balance it. You think of the balancing scale, you got load on one side, you got supply on the other side, you got your balance, and that balance is sitting at 60 hertz, a frequency. When those start getting out of sync with each other, you get outside of frequency, all the electronics will start shutting off. They don't like it. So you gotta keep them balanced, and it's moving at about the speed of light. So it's not just understanding the supply that's coming in, but how does the grid actually operate itself?
That's what happened in Spain earlier this week.
Yep.
The entire country in the black because they lost control of that balance.
Yep.
So imagine that happening here in January when it's 20 below outside.
And you don't just turn it back on.
No,
It takes days.
Yeah, so actually the deep freeze in Texas in January a couple of years ago, and they have a diverse portfolio. It's a good case study to look at. We have some studies to talk about that kind of walk through exactly what happened. There's a professor from Columbia University, Melissa Lott, she did a great podcast on what happened in Texas. And what I loved, if you're familiar with soccer, she placed our generation sources like players on a soccer field and what their job is. And I was like, oh, I get it now. But the grid is very difficult. And the grid is one of the things that's not innovating as fast as the other things in energy.
There's been a new group formed
for the Northwest, not to say, it's called the Northwestern Energy Caucus. And their whole focus is to study the grid in the
Yeah.
Northwest and say, all right, what can we do? And it's not just Montana, it's Montana, Idaho, I think Wyoming, Washington, Oregon, and parts of California are gonna be involved in that to try to figure out, because if you can't, like you said, you can't look at it as just a generation source. It's how we're gonna get it there. It's, like you were saying, how are we gonna get wind somewhere else? Well, ask, NextEra how much it cost them to build the line to Cayenne. And I mean, it was close to $1 billion, I think, for them to produce that line. So it's all gotta be looked at as one big package, not just one thing.
It is in that deep freeze in Texas. Here's a great example. I talked about the four pathways into Montana. Northwestern Energy is its own balancing authority within the WEC. That's a unique situation that we're in here in Montana. Our South Dakota operations, they're part of the SPP balancing authority. During that deep freeze in Texas, and this is how that affects when you get into those things, SPP gave us mandates to start shutting off circuits in South Dakota to help keep the grid stable in Texas. That's how fast those things move and how they're all interconnected throughout there. So they impact each other all over the place. Something happens over here, it impacts over here, and it happens in the blink of an eye.
So, I like what Molly had to say because there are alternative energy. And I think to make an informed decision, we really do need to look at each different energy source, solar, wind, whatever, you know, the pros and cons and the risk. Because I will say, I drive to Pennsylvania twice a year. In Minnesota, I pass through this wind area, and it's like, first time I was like, wow, what are all these, you know, windmills doing basically? So there gotta be, again, a backup system, you know, so it's not just saying like that freeze in Texas and this and that. To make that informed decision, we need to ask every single aspect, pros and cons and risk. Economics, yes, but then you gotta look at, again, that water source, and it's not just Colstrip and the reservation, Lanier and such, it's all the ranchers and farmers in between that depend on the environment to raise their cattle and everything else. It's all of us together, you know, so pros, cons, risk, and backup, because there's gotta be a backup in Minnesota somewhere that, you know, there has to be, there's that information out there, and that's important to present it all so people can make that informed decision.
Right, I'm not familiar with the Minnesota setup of their grid and stuff, but there is a nuclear plant in Minnesota that they run right in conjunction with those windmills.
It's Monticello.
Monticello?
Monticello is the plant.
Yeah, I think there's three.
Yeah, there's three.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, a couple of points I was just wondering is like, so the Florida Power Station, because it was referenced, is large scale, right? It's a large scale, so it's not fair to actually make the comparison to a small modular reactor at this point. Okay, so just making that clarification. The other thing is, I looked up on the NRC website and it says 61 of the plants that exist today, 53 of them leak. And so, just to say, like, it wasn't just 2 of them that leaked, it was 60, or 53, or yeah, 53, according to the NRC's website, I just looked it up. So just making that point too as a correction. The other thing that I'm looking at too right now is just the fact that we're watching the trend of NEPA getting gutted right now. And so I know there's a lot of assurances that exist right now and a lot of commitments and protections that exist right now, but we're watching that getting gutted in real time, right? So 10, 15 years from now, that may not be the case, so there may not be an actual commitment from the federal government to actually dispose of and have a way of handling long-term nuclear waste storage, correct? So just naming that as something as well. Also, just to say who's making these decisions about what is acceptable in terms of being in compliance, it's corporations, right? Who's paying our politicians to actually make some of the decisions? Not all of them, I will say, not all of them. A lot of times on a federal level though, corporations are paying billions of dollars into political campaigns. Therefore, those politicians are then beholden to uphold what the corporations want, right? So just naming like that is a trend, it's a fact, right? We can actually go through and count the numbers of which politicians accept which money from what corporations, right? And then we can actually trace that directly to what legislation goes through. That ties directly to what is deemed acceptable in terms of pollution rates, in terms of like, you know, only this amount is being polluted. We seen the presentation last night from the CEO about, you know, Colstrip staying in compliance, which is great, right? But that is comparatively though, and in comparison to other power plants in the country, we are not that great. We are the largest polluter, comparatively, right? So let's just say that's actually true out there, right? Like there is data to back that up, I can pull it, we'll share that, right? That's a fact. So just saying that's a concern. My biggest concern here isn't that I'm not against like Colstrip, I'm not against people. I know we need to produce power, we need to make sure people are taken care of. We also need to make sure that people have jobs and that they're able to have livelihoods and live full, whole lives, right? So I understand that, and I know that like it's not reality to go from like shutting down a power plant here in Colstrip to like automatically there's a magic answer out there that's not nuclear. So I get it, like I understand the process and how things go. But my biggest concern here is like we're getting a lot of information right now that is just not, like it's still in test phase, right? And so it feels a little premature that y'all are presenting some of this stuff when you actually don't have the stuff that we need to the answers that we're asking right now, right? So it feels a little premature. What you do have answers for is renewables, right? Like there is answers, that has been around. And so that's why I asked about the public sessions, because there's so much commitment here, right? And to be honest, like defensiveness of nuclear here, right? That I just want to know that there's many options that we need to be exploring and that those are also being brought to the table equally and equitably, right? And then also naming the tribal consultation piece is like, we're gonna see the erosion of tribal consultation. It's already happening. It's being removed at the state legislature and it's gonna start getting undermined through NEPA getting stripped, right? So that means you are actually not beholden to community, but your corporation. So you're actually beholden to make the most amount of profit to your shareholders, which is great, I get it. But that means you're actually not upholding what the community needs, and you're actually not beholden to what most especially the tribal community needs, right? So that's the concern. It's not to say the answer is no, and it's not to say that no one will ever be open to it, but it's to say that there are real concerns and we're asking these real questions because we will foot the bill at the end of the day. The Northern Cheyenne community, right? We will. Because if anything were to happen, God forbid, right? Who's going to help the tribal community? Who's going to resource that to make sure that we have what we need to be safe? Anyone else can leave. Even last night, someone said like, well, I'll just move away. If anything were to happen with nuclear, I'll move, I'll leave. We can't leave, this is our land. We have deep, deep spiritual and cultural connections to this land. We will not leave it. But who's gonna support that, right? When the trend is already moving towards removing our rights, and has been historically, right? Talk about the education system. The other thing that's not included there is history. So just naming and pointing out a few of those things, but my question comes to two things. The exclusionary and avoidance factors. Fires, I asked last night, are those part of that? Because they said that their results and their study said there were no avoidance or exclusionary factors. But what about fires? Montana's known for that. I mean, literally our houses right now, we can't get good priced home insurance because fires, right? Lander's the same thing. Every so many years it happens. It's gonna continue to happen. In a moment where climate change is actually increasing and we're starting to have more extreme climate crisis and catastrophes, wildfires are only gonna get worse, right? And so why is that not an exclusionary factor, I guess, is I'm confused. So I'm just curious a little bit more about the survey, right? Also social factors. We don't have the infrastructure right now. We're a food desert, right? Like it is, it's a food desert. We're rural. That's just a common rural thing. That's an issue that happens. There's also the roads. I was literally just trying to get a little section of road fixed in front of my place and I was told, well, currently Colstrip residents over here don't pay taxes, so we're not gonna fix these roads here. And that's small here in Colstrip. What happens when we have an influx of people coming from out of state to work here more than we do now, right? They will be coming to these lands. How are we gonna support that when we don't have the funds currently to support this infrastructure, right? So just flagging that, who's gonna pay for that, right? That's one thing. So my question is around like, what is the factors and why wasn't fire included in an exclusionary factor? The second question is, where are the resources and the minerals coming from to actually power this nuclear, small modular reactor? If it's uranium, right, then it's gonna come from native lands. I think the statistics say like the majority of the proposed transition minerals mines in the so-called US are either on native lands or within a 35-mile radius of native lands. So again, native people will foot the bill. So just naming some of those things of like, where is this coming from, right? Like where are the minerals and resources coming from, and then what are the exclusionary factors, and why wasn't fire included that, and why wasn't social factors included in that? Thank you.
I'm gonna do my best with that. So your two questions that I got from this one, and you made a comment earlier about why would we present it without having answers? And it goes back to what Molly was talking about. We're at the very beginning, so it's almost catch-22. Down at the beginning of it, we're not gonna have all the answers. Yeah, we're gonna sit up here, we're gonna have this discussion because we're trying to identify the gaps. What are the concerns? What do we need to go research? How do we answer some of these questions? So we don't have. But then you get caught with the, well, why are you up here presenting it if you don't have the answers? You kind of a catch-22 right there, right? So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Wildfires. I was pretty heavily involved in writing our wildfire mitigation plan at Northwestern Energy. When you look at threats to a nuclear plant, you can mitigate the damage of a wildfire to a nuclear plant. You can clear vegetation around it, and you can mitigate that, so it's not a showstopper. An exclusionary factor is a showstopper. You can't do anything to mitigate this hazard. Wildfires can mitigate that. That doesn't mean they're gonna go away and then we're gonna have wildfires, but you can keep it from damaging the plant on that. And then your last question was on supply chain management of the fuel. That one's still being developed out there, specifically in a lot of the different new fuel in the new Gen 4 reactors, some of the higher technology ones, whether it's a molten salt fuel or it's a TRISO X fuel, if it's TRISO X or it's any kind of TRISO fuel that they're working on. Those are all being developed right now. And I think it's that one vendor is working on building one in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Fuel facility. These guys could talk more about the fuel supply chain management.
I think
So she was around the mining aspect of that, though, where the uranium's coming from.
And there's a
Yeah.
horrible history of uranium and Native American tribes.
Absolutely.
Yep, yeah, it's just terrible. And there's no walking away from the reality of that, it's badly handled. And I think you're right, if you don't get the uranium here in the United States, it's a lot of it overseas. You get it in Australia, you get it in Canada, those are on tribal lands a lot of times too. So there's no getting away from that in particular. The Japanese have a solution. It used to be the world thought we would use up all the uranium, that's why there was all this technology around plutonium. But now, the Japanese looked at it and they said, well, the price will go up and up and up, and then they had a lot of new plants, and they looked at it and went, well, we can get it out of the seawater for $300 a kg. And so suddenly this is not worth any more than that, it's capped. There's a technology there where you can get it. So it's a worldwide issue. I think everybody is trying to be careful around it because of the issue.
So we do have some reports that have looked at the projections of how much new nuclear is needed to be built. We've looked at where we get that uranium today, where we might get it in the future. I mentioned last night that we have banned importing uranium from Russia. And that does not mean that we're gonna domesticate everything here. Wyoming's been doing actually a lot of work in this space. They just opened, they reopened a uranium mine, this summer, I think. And, and that was because that's an opportunity that their state is interested in. But the reality is, more than likely, we are going to be importing our uranium from allies, okay?
Yeah. I'm good.
Alright, bless your soul. And everything else over there. But, we can share with you, a lot of it depends on.
Got that on video.
You know, what kind and how many reactors you're building and how much fuel they need and those types of things. We started to do some of that forward-looking research, and we would be happy to share that information. I've lost control. I'm gonna go over here and come back to you guys. Yes, sir.
Last night it was referenced that we're on step 2 of a 100+ step process here in decision, right?
Yes.
Would you mind giving us a preview of what sort of decisions, what sort of information would have to be researched and gathered to get us to a final decision point? and how the public will be involved in that based on your previous experience assisting with this.
So, I'm not going to go through 100 steps.
No, I just
But let me give you kind of a feel for it. So first of all, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about this particular study. This was not a study that Northwestern asked for. Northwestern was nice enough to participate in the study with us. This was something that started with the October 2022 meeting with Dwayne Ankney and wanting to understand the feasibility of nuclear for Colstrip from an economic perspective. And we were doing research. I have a research area in my program dedicated to coal communities and the consideration of adding nuclear to those communities. It's important to not look at this at the 100,000 foot level, but get into the details. So we funded a study, but you cannot do a study like this without the utilities. And the challenge we had is Colstrip is owned by multiple utilities. And so it took a little bit of time, and some of them are not interested in having that conversation. They did not want to explore nuclear energy. Northwestern did. So that's kind of, this study is a study from the national lab that Northwestern helped us to perform. And with this feasibility study, basically the next step is to decide, is this right for us? Do they want to spend more money inside of Northwestern to explore this technology? These types of studies are meant to say, to give you an idea of whether there's enough pros here, like you don't have exclusionary factors, you don't have avoidance factors, there's a positive economic impact, you have workforce that would benefit from this, those types of things, to invest more resources in going forward. So what I would expect is that Northwestern is going to continue the work that they're doing in their energy planning group. And they're going to continue to dive deeper into this technology. How fast they do that is probably going to be dependent upon how fast these developers are ready to talk about it. They've been very clear that they have a long timeline in mind for this particular station, and they're also looking in their whole service territory, right? So this covers South Dakota and Montana. I will come straight back to you, I promise. I think it's up to the task force also, that Dwayne talked about last night, to determine what the community conversation should be. And it seems that Northwestern is willing to continue to participate in that conversation. I imagine, I don't know when your integrated resource plan is due, but they might talk about nuclear as a technology in an integrated resource plan. I don't know when that's due to the state or the utility commission.
We put it out every couple of years, and
Yeah.
It's either Montana's IRP or South Dakota's IRP is coming out this summer, and then the
Okay.
next one will be next year.
So lots of utilities, you can look at those integrated resource plans and you can kind of see what they're thinking. And that will change over time. That changes as the demand changes, as technologies change. But really the triggering event is whether you could pursue an early site permit for Colstrip or for some of the sites in South Dakota, and that allows you to go ahead and start that environmental assessment. You're not choosing a technology at that point, but it would give you a license to build nuclear in the future, and that license is good for 20 years. Or you could wait until you've decided that you would like to pursue nuclear, and then you apply for a license with the NRC. And that does have, a public engagement process associated with it. From the time that you make a decision to pursue nuclear energy and make applications to breaking ground and having an operating plant is typically an 8 to 10 year endeavor. So if you want, let's say you want a plant in 15 years, you're probably, there's a lot of pre-work that goes into, if you want to break ground, it would be about 8 years from now. And that 2 to 3 years before that, you'd be in conversations about the technology and that you might like to build. You're gonna be doing some site work and those types of things. But at the end of the day, the utility has to come forward and share that this is the technology that they would like to build. And I don't think they're there yet. And we did this with the hope that understanding for the reason we've been doing our research is understanding for utilities that don't have nuclear in their portfolio today, it can be difficult to consider the technology. So we wanted to partner with those utilities and understand what parts of that process were harder for them such that we can bring that information forward for other utilities. So, it was not meant to say that nuclear is meant for Colstrip, needs to be built here. This is a research project. But a lot of the steps are going to follow the integrated resource plan that a utility does.
So do you think that after Trump is no longer president, do you think that this will go away?
So nuclear energy has had bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle. We had support we've been kind of a politically agnostic technology over recent years.
Have you guys, in all your research, have you guys considered the event at the North Dakota Access Pipeline?
In North Dakota,
No Dapple?
I'm not familiar with that, but I'll look that up. Go ahead.
Okay, mine is just a general question for all of us here, okay? I am from Lane. I'm from Lane, and I'm still working in power industry. Lately I'm working on coal plants that we're gonna basically kind of go towards decommissioning, okay? That's kind of what's happening. And I see the longevity of some of these stations because they've done improvements, okay? They've done improvements, they've added FGDs to them, they byproduct gypsum off of the slurries, okay? That's some of the technology. They put in carbon injection, get rid of the mercury, okay? They do ammonia to get rid of the NOx. Okay, that's what they were doing to these older coal plants, so they can stay online, and it does clean things up. I know that in the industry-wide, and I've worked in South Africa, they've had a problem with electricity, and they were trying to build, catch up. We went and refurbished mothballed coal plants. And that's because the infrastructure was not planned for. And I'm afraid that that's what's happening here, because they started having the brownouts, and then pretty soon there's no power. And even with the 2 big stations that were put in, okay, in Kusili and Medupi, huge power stations, coal, that's still not enough. They've got load shedding. You get a schedule on your phone when your power's gonna be out in your area. It's 4 hours, it's 6 hours, it's 8 hours. Now, it affects everybody. We're looking at homes, we're looking at hospitals, we're looking at businesses, police stations, any kind of source that uses electricity, which is just about everything, right? So I see this kind of a little bit coming over to us now, because our infrastructure, our grids, they have not been worked on for years. We're so far behind. Now we got AI pushing. Okay, we can make things so much faster, let's push it on these grids. Our grids aren't ready for that. We make innovations and we catch up and we can do something. All right, fine, that's great. But when it comes to these power stations now in the United States, yes, it's looking more like it's going to have to go towards the nuclear. Because our coal plants, we're already past the threshold of the 1.5 for global warming. We're already, there's no turning back. There is no turning back. So our temperatures are just gonna continue to increase. We're still gonna start getting these worse weather conditions, right? We're gonna get hail, July. We had the fires going on over here in California this past winter. Wildfires, going crazy. And then we had a deep freeze on this side of the country. And we're flooding in the middle. And this is like the weather we have in the summertime. Summer is basically when we have our wildfires here. We get the thunder, lightning, there's fires. Okay, so my focus is this. We know that here in Colstrip, we're gonna have to do something for our grid. We're gonna have to do something to ensure that we have power if this station goes offline. We're lose all that power. There is a way, I know, I understand that if we go with the nuclear, I don't understand the technology right now with these small reactors, but it seems ideally if it could just be plug and play. Bring those things in, plug and play, we're pushing power out the grid. Substations, now we're gonna be able to push power to the east. And that should be able to be available to us. If this is down, then we can pull power in and supplies power to our houses, right? Okay. Now we're having a discussion, all of us here, about the future of this area for us. These kids that are running around, these kids that aren't even born, we have to make good decisions. But we have to have inclusion. We have to be a part of this from our reservation because we gave up a lot so these stations can be built. And that seems to be pushed under the rug. My concern is, why are we pushing so fast in the state legislature to get nuclear here? And right here at Colstrip? That is the thing. That is the concern we have, is they're pushing it down our throats and they haven't even told us about this. We don't understand this stuff. I came from Miami to come here to sit in these meetings because I want to.
So,
Excuse me, because I'm thinking of the children. I'm thinking of these little kids that are in schools here. They're gonna be the ones that run our tribe for us. They're gonna be dealing with these kind of conversations with others that come here. And just like Colstrip, there were a lot of people that moved here. I worked at Colstrip. I started out here. We had families come from all over the US when Green 4 were being built and when they were scattered. That's what built this town, the coal money, the tax money. Beautiful high school, walking trails. We improved the water system. Everything was built because of this. So now, we look ahead and we think, okay, if we have to do away with that coal plant, we could do this plug and play thing here. But you have to involve us because some of those jobs are gonna pay good.
yes.
And that's what we need down there. We have such a high suicide. They have a funeral today for somebody that committed suicide. We're losing our youth.
So, what I can offer is to come to the tribe and hear your questions and give you the information that you want and that you need to participate in this conversation. And it's not going to be, and this is, I'm not meaning to be rude to the leadership here in Colstrip, the relationship that I've had with Jim or with Gary or with Northwestern. We will come and talk to you about the information that you need. In terms of legislation, as as a lab employee, I'm not allowed to lobby for legislation. But I can do the same thing that we've done for others that are interested in participating in the legislative process and share with you, policies that we've seen in other states. We can talk about, the laws that are here. We can have that same conversation. I'm hopeful that this task force that's being set up starts to bridge that gap in terms of inclusion. But what I hear from you as a tribe is also that you're interested in more than nuclear energy. And that is something that we can do from our lab as well. We have experts in all kinds of energy. So, and I apologize that that's not something that we did before now. I didn't have permission until recently to engage directly with tribal nations. That's something that from day one, as I started in this work, we've been trying to get, but it has taken us some time. But I now have that permission and we can engage. And I'm looking forward to that. And we will make it a priority in our program to make that happen quickly.
So I know that, you have a high volume of commitments to informing us now. But I know that, there were probably several of you that were involved in the process of the legislation making. I'm wondering, why weren't you more supportive and had this volume of commitment going into this legislation when there was tribal consultation and voter consultation? I mean, okay, just a second. Okay, so since all of that failed in the bill, will you come to Northern Cheyenne and discuss this with us across the table so where we can guarantee that we have an input in 20 years? Would you be willing to be a part of our legislation as a tribe so that way you and I, Northern Cheyenne, all of these parties will stay in close contact and consultation? That is what I'm proposing.
So I can help to technically inform legislation that you might propose, but I cannot lobby for any legislation. I'm limited, I would lose my job.
So it would be a resolution in agreement between the both parties that we stay in contact and information to be able to pass that kind of information to the people. It would be a resolution within our tribe that would include all of the entities that are involved in this nuclear development in our nation. So this is not state Montana, this is Northern Cheyenne resolution that would include your guys, your party, and the Northern Cheyenne people to stay in close contact within the development of these years, because it is not included on the bill anymore, it's gone. And in less than 7 days, it's gonna become a bill, so there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee, so what
I
I'm
am
gonna do.
absolutely willing to explore the extent of what I can commit to.
That would be good.
This is new. Emily and I are excited to have an opportunity. We've been trusted with this. It is not often that national lab groups are trusted to have this interaction. But I don't know the limits of what I can commit to.
Well,
I'm willing to explore that.
If you would be willing to explore that,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
to stay in contact and to stay in agreement with each other, we need some kind of solidified agreement that we're gonna be able to sit at this table together in 15, 20
And it may
years.
not be Gaines' commitment to that, that might be something that I need to take to my lab director, because the lab itself has more, authority than I do as a small program. But we'd be willing to, explore the right pathway, to address the concern.
Yeah, what I would like to see is an agreement between the both parties to stay in close contact within the next 15, 20 years.
Okay.
I have a quick
And
question
then I will
around,
stand up on my soapbox.
Northwest Energy. There's just in the spirit of like dispelling rumors and whatnot and having my facts. So I did hear that the reason why there was the push for the small modular reactor was to power a data center. So I'm just curious of like, is that the push for it, or it is really just generally like if you know, the Colstrip mine right now shut down, it's to replace that power. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a fair question. We started originally exploring how do we transition if Colstrip gets shut down. And those first ones came out, they were talking, EPA came out under the Biden administration, had these new rules coming on. We started having conversations about what would we do if we had to shut down Colstrip? How would we go through that? And we started talking about, is nuclear a possibility? What are the steps we'd have to do to get to that go, no-go decision? And started talking about that before the data centers came on scene. There's an absolute truth to it that data centers now showing up on the scene, and they want a lot of power too on there. So what that does is if we ended up, if we were to be able to get to a go decision at that date, obviously what we'd have to do now is take a look at our IRP and our future forecast, and is it one small modular reactor or is it two small modular reactors? That's the conversation. How many of these, that's what's beautiful about these modulars, in my opinion, beautiful, is they're scalable. Now you can start ramping them up to what size do you need. Our focus right now is our base core customer, not the data centers, from where we're talking about it here. But yes, data centers are coming in and saying, hey, we'd like a whole lot of power.
And I think the other part about small modular reactors to remember, or actually just nuclear power, they have a higher capacity factor, so they're online more than they are offline. So compared to a coal station that has, it's about 60%, we're operating around 93%. So you don't have to replace the megawatts from the coal station megawatt for megawatt, because you actually end up with about 30% more power going out on the grid.
You have a question?
Yes.
We'll start now today. Good morning, my name is Liz Horse. I'm the Bernie representative for the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council. And I want to know why, you said back in 2022, you guys started discussing the nuclear, and why wasn't the tribe informed? Because I was elected back in 2020, and I got re-elected this past year again for another 4 years. So that's why she brings up that open communication between the tribe and what you guys are doing now, and just wanting that open communication and information for our people on our end. That's why I want to know.
So in 2022, we were invited to a town meeting to introduce nuclear energy along with NuScale. And for a long time we did that meeting, and we waited to hear more questions that might come from Senator Ankney. At that time, we had helped them to identify resources for the feasibility study that the state did. I think the next thing that happened was we were invited to come talk about nuclear at the Energy Open. This project came along 2023, 2024, Amanda?
I think it officially kicked off.
But, part of my constraint is until this year, I did not have permission to engage directly with the tribes, and it was through the public meetings that the Economic Development Council was hosting that I think we were expecting that engagement. I'm committed to, now that I have permission to engage directly with the tribe, to have those conversations and to help however I can.
So you don't necessarily need permission to engage with the tribe, it's just an act to come and engage with the tribe. And so, I'm like, the permission on your side, but still, I mean, if this seems kind of premature now, just to listen to you guys discuss this, it seems a bit premature now, since none of you guys haven't studied what kind of layout it would, take to to be here in Colstrip, it just kinda seems like, well, you know, it was 2022, but then really 2023, you know? So I'm wondering though, this task force you speak of, are there any Northern Cheyenne or tribal representatives?
Absolutely. Ernie Robinson will be representing you.
Is Ernie here today?
I don't see him or haven't seen him, and I don't think he was here last night either, so.
Well, that doesn't help.
Well, so here's the other opportunity. If there's, we can repeat the meeting that we had for anyone that missed it last night. Okay, we can do that virtually, we can come back. We can record it and share it. I don't want that to be because someone had something else to do on a Friday night other than talk about nuclear energy, you know?
This is kind of important though. This is kind of important.
It is kind of important,
I mean, it's really important. This is the next 20 years, you know?
Because it is important, we commit to, if Ernie needs, us to come back and have a conversation with him individually, we will do that. If we can do it virtually, we'll do that.
So was Ernie aware of this development in 2023, since he's been a part of your guys'?
He just recently got appointed by the White Committee, it wasn't a tribal appointment.
Okay. Well, the door is open in Northern Cheyenne Tribe. I gladly invite all of you to come sit and discuss this with the people.
Okay.
Now, this is not, the Northern Cheyenne Tribe is just not my concern, it's a concern of all of Southeastern Montana, the ranchers, the farmers, and everything. So if you'd be willing to commit to some of these meetings, not just in Reindeer, but in some of the other counties too, because we're in Ashland, there are a lot of ranchers and farmers there. And so, you know, the door is open.
Okay, thank you for that, and we will do that. Yes, sir.
One other thing I want to clarify is that you're going to have another energy open in August.
Yes.
Yes, and that's an open invitation to the tribe. They do notify the tribe when they have that, it's just that nobody shows up. The council has been invited, and they had to show up. Emma Harris and I came in 2023, I think it was. Emma Harris and I came to this meeting that they had, this energy open. That's when we learned these things were they were economic development going on that basis. And that's what they were talking about. I took it back to the tribe. Here, this is what's going on. It's only 22 miles to Colstrip, 3,000 miles from me from Miami. You guys should go down there, get engaged. You've been invited. It's your job to represent us. Get down there and be there. This place should have all the councilmen here tonight. Today. Yesterday they should have been here. So the thing is getting that out and showing it and say, look, there's gonna be another meeting in August. We're all invited, if you wanna come, make the time and be there.
We wanna make
Discussion
sure
will go on.
that we're spending time with you and coming to you too. We're not gonna expect you to always come to us.
Well, this is my home, you know, no matter where I go in the world, at the end of the day, I'm coming home to be buried up in Mudford, okay? So, for me, it's important to be here. And I kinda got the sense there weren't people talking about it. So I was grateful to have been able to participate and find out about it and take the information and kind of get people involved with this is what's going on in Colstrip, right down the road, you know, go shopping there. So anyway, so just to reiterate what I had said earlier, with the communication and stuff, you know, we've kind of been, I guess we kind of dropped the ball because we did communicate with each other and say, okay, Colstrip's gonna have us, let's call them up and find out when the next meeting is. We can come participate, or maybe we can invite them over, if they can come present something. You know, we gotta have this open conversations and engage everything, and that kind of clears up some of these misconceptions we have about each other. Because this is gonna affect all of us. And it's gonna affect the future of these kids. These kids that are going to school, those are the ones that we have to really, you know, that's what we're gonna try to do something good for them, and their children, and the children of those kids.
Yes.
Cause we're not going anywhere. This is home for us, like she said earlier. We're not going anywhere, you know, you guys can go relatives everywhere, but this is home for us.
I just have a simple bottom line question for all the people that are in the front here. especially the ones that are the science people, would you have any issue raising your kids and grandkids next to one of these storage facilities
No,
for their entire lives?
no.
I'll tell you too, I grew up in Montana. I live in Idaho.
I'm sorry, I was just seriously asking a question. I'm from Minnesota, I know about Minnesota. I know that brain cancer is a huge issue there. It's being studied currently. So that's my question to you. You'd have no problem having your family, born and raised, sitting next to one of these storage facilities.
We have, at Idaho National Lab, we've been operating since the fifties, and multiple generations of people have worked on or around, material that's not in casks, and still safe, and so there's a lot of protection there. There was some questions last night about how long do the casks last, and we mentioned 20 or 40 years, that's the paperwork that lasts that long, the licenses. But the cast lasts much longer than that, hundreds of years, and they're very safe.
My husband works in nuclear energy, and I've worked in nuclear energy for 32 years. And I wouldn't, I do not have any issue. I would love to see my son go into nuclear energy. He's more interested in cars. So I'm losing that battle. I would love to see him go into energy in particular, but I think he's gonna work on cars.
Thank you.
Just, there's always the unexpected, and, you know, this is probably the safest place around, you know, that's given, but, you know, in Fukushima, we had the earthquake, right, and then in Ukraine, they didn't expect that, you know, there's war, so they don't, you know, they talked about wildfires. The only thing I could see is maybe like domestic terrorism and things like this, but, you know, if you have solar and you have nuclear and you have wind, you don't have to worry about those things. If you have nuclear, then you have to have, you know, be ready for anything.
Yes, you do, and that's why when you are making a decision about nuclear energy, it can't be anybody else's decision. That when we built our fleet that we operate today, those decisions were made and communities were told. And that's not the way we want to do this going forward. It does need to be the decision in conjunction with the utility about building the plant. Because it is something that you will have for 80 to 100 years. But it's nobody else's decision. And yes, you do, because of what could happen at a power plant, yes, you need to prepare for other things, but any industrial facility that you consider is going to have an impact on the community and the land that has to be considered. Yes, sir.
I had an opportunity to work with Montana State University on environmental impact studies. If I'm honest, I think that was the last century, so. But at one point, we were offered 5 and 6 to look at units 5 and 6 here. And then and you're nodding, so you probably remember more than I do, but, and then it was withdrawn to do 5 and 6, and so our studies went away. The reason I preface that is that I'm not sure that your group or we're even at that point where we really do an environmental study or a true feasibility study. And the reason I already mentioned education, but it's also things like housing. It's a little more detailed on income levels of workers and workforce. And so I guess I'm please respectfully requesting, when we start to get to those points, please greatly include the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, because we have some wonderful workers, as Northwestern Energy already knows, and we have more. And so the impact there is tremendous, not only economically, but environmentally, and you're hearing a lot of those concerns. So please include that, but include things like housing. I did that because Patty elbowed me and she had another appointment. She's one of our local real estate agents who can't find houses to sell now, let alone.
I've done more work in the full report, we didn't touch on it last night, and we haven't talked about it today, but in the full report, there's more detail about the workforce.
Okay. So you do have some limits to go a little more feasibility specific than.
This is the first place where we've had the opportunity to actually look at a deployment timeline that includes the construction peak, especially in small towns, understanding, and I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't do it for northeastern Arizona, because when you look at Coronado Generating Station, when Bechtel came in and built that station, they left a lot of housing behind that has just deteriorated, and it was housing that was there to support the construction workforce. And it really was an awakening for me that, like, there's so many pieces that you have to think about as a town and being ready for building any kind of facility like this.
I can give you a tour of the old Colstrip that used to exist, but now it's only ghosts around town, buildings and stuff like that. My last question would be, I think you said you sites down to 16 or 18, sort of, and not selected, but what's the chance of us getting to see some of those potential sites? I thought that was an easy question, by the way.
Yeah, so that 16 sites, the 16 was in South Dakota, and we evaluated a number of different areas around the Colstrip. Just grabbed, we grabbed we'd look at like a section of land, and we'd try and put it through the EPRI study to do the scores on it to see what came out, and they're all coming out pretty much the same on there, and that's when we asked Game, could you guys go through this, you've done this before, looked at it. What they looked back at is we didn't find any exclusionary or avoidance factors in there. There will become a time, I can't release that stuff right now, that I will be able to put it out and show what we looked at, where we looked at, property.
But understand, we've only looked at the first third of the factors that have to be considered. The EPRI guideline that we're talking about is kind of the gold standard for siting, and there's another 20 or so factors that have to be considered. So this just gives us that initial screen to say, yes, it's possible, and you don't have any showstoppers in there, and when you're ready, you need to start looking at all these other factors. Siting a nuclear power plant is a multi-year study. You have to collect weather data, you have to do core samples. Sounds like you're familiar with this kind of analysis. So the environmental analysis is very long, and you want to have high confidence in the site that you're gonna spend that money on. So
But you're not there yet.
But we're not there yet.
So
The other piece to keep in mind about that stuff, when I sit there and say, I'm looking at different sites around Colstrip, we're not showing up on people's doorsteps and going out and starting to dig holes in their ground and saying, just taking a look at your dirt and stuff like that. These are desktop studies, stuff we're looking at maps, what's publicly available data that we can find. I kind of hit on it a little bit yesterday on there, some of the high level stuff is, what is the seismology in the region like? What do the floodplains look like? What's your access to heavy haul railroad, highway, water, transmission, so on and so forth. Once you get to that one level, if you are, at some point in time, you gotta demonstrate a site control where actually now we can go out and actually do the EPA studies. Now we gotta get into that next layer, which I'm sure you're familiar of, to go down to that level. We haven't gotten to that level yet.
I wanted to come back to your question. Just because I'm comfortable raising my family there, doesn't mean that you should. And whatever questions or information we can bring to help with that decision, happy to do that. I felt like I came off a little bit flip in answering that.
No,
It's because of
I
it's
just
because
wanted to
I've been
comment.
with this technology for over 30 years. And I was kind of in love with nuclear before I even got a job in it. So, I don't know, I'm just weird on many levels, these people tell you that. But I just wanted to come back that just because we say that we're comfortable, hopefully, that helps. But I'm not here to tell you that that's the right thing for you. We are at times.
She's had a hand up, it's been short, it's a shorthand, so maybe you can see it.
I'm sorry, so,
Okay.
and I wanna respond to that too, because, again, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, you know, coal mines, 3 Mile and such, but I've lived here since 1991, and I've lived on the reservation. And I will tell you, over the years, I'm gonna say, you could be comfortable, but this is my concern. I have seen, when we built the new high school down in Lane Deer and such, I have seen, when we have built things on the reservations, people have come down, the constructors, to build it, and they've taken shortcuts. Okay, they did not follow the plans developed by the structural engineers and things like that. And that's why I asked that question before, how do you mitigate fail-safes? Because I see people do that. I see people rook people on the reservation all the time. And that really bothers me. And unfortunately, that's part of the prejudice that exists. You know, people trying to do things. And I raised my son there, he went to school there, you know, he now lives in Colstrip and such. That is my concern of the safeguards. You know, and I know we're not there, but when the people come to construct it, where are the structural engineers, which my brother is in Pennsylvania and such, to make sure these safeguards are done right? You know, that's my biggest concern, because if they're not, we know there's gonna be a problem.
So there are scheduled inspections throughout construction by the federal government.
Yes.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission comes in various stages of construction to confirm that you are building what you designed and what they approved. So there is a second check on the construction.
There's a manufacturer in Idaho Falls that I visited that works on building glove boxes and things to work on nuclear material in. The duct tape that they use in their facility had to be approved to nuclear standards. So they could, I mean, it was like, to say that they're regulated and watched carefully is a huge understatement, because they had to have special duct tape.
So anybody.
If they were gonna use duct tape on anything that they were working on, it had to be approved. I mean,
So,
really detailed regulations.
so anybody that's in the nuclear supply chain has to have nuclear quality assurance. Because our requirements, there's not a lot of deviation allowed from the design, because once you're at that construction point, if there's any changes also in the design, those changes have to be submitted back to the NRC for approval. And I'd be happy to get more into the details of that and actually bring a licensing person with us to talk about the federal side of it, because that's where, that's also, part of the reason for having the NRC. The NRC's job is public health and safety. It's not to approve nuclear power plants, it's public health and safety.
But it happens. I know my brother's a structural engineer, and he has shut down projects because he'll see something, he's like, that. So that is really, really, really important.
Because the other interesting thing I've learned lately is that they're using more digital twin technology too, where they build it in a 3D model first, like where you go in and put on goggles and fly through the whole construction. And so they have like a practice of building it and making sure that can you move equipment through here, and can you walk from one place to the next, and how do you do that efficiently? They can model all of that. And so it's not the first time they've done it. They can look at all of those things using new technology, and so they're building it right the first time because they can foresee those kind of, clashes in building technology things before it ever happens.
But science and science funding nationally is really under fire now. So please, when somebody says to me, and I'm pointing at you, sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
But when you say, well, the federal government is responsible for getting rid of all that, excuse me, not waste, but spent fuel, thank you, see, I learned something. Okay, out here, we're supposed to believe that. It's not that I don't believe you, because it looks to me like we've got an awful lot of science, which I absolutely love. We started in our high school the modeling programs that you're talking about. God, high school kids loved them. And look what's happening in the whole world today. I mean, we're doing wonderful things. And I'm just telling you, let's please not start another conversation, but nationally, science and science funding is under extreme attack. So, just saying.
It is, part of my personal anxiety.
Okay, anyway, thank you for being here.
One last question.
It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. I was a councilman and I did do the big project, and it didn't get done because of COVID and the worldwide shutdown. But I kind of wanted to thank you for saying what you did about our communities holding hands together, because we can be a lot stronger together as a community and a tribe. Because when we go to Washington, D.C., we're considered a senator as well when we're a councilman. And we get treated the same way. And when the last Trump administration was really against wind and solar, we pushed through it. We actually threatened to sue, and they backed down, of course, as everybody knows, and we went forward. And we have over a gigawatt of wind up there. We did studies. We have 5 years worth of wind studies right now. We have I think the biggest thing that we need with the community of Colstrip is the interconnection, that 13 miles of interconnection, so that we can all work together. And we also planned a water battery too, quite a bit bigger than the surge pond. And so we can actually be, we can supply that power when Colstrip needs it. And we have plenty of ideas for solar. And then one thing with solar, I wanted to kind of let everybody know is that at nighttime, if you change one thing on a solar panel, of the newest solar panels, they can actually collect power at nighttime. That's one thing that all the doubters of solar and these renewable energies, that's one more mark that we get for being renewable. One of the other aspects was our environment here. I always say that as a Cheyenne, I'm a steward of this land, and the first thing I always think of is the land and the heat pollution, the thermal pollution in our aquifer. We're sitting in an aquifer right now, and it changes directions 3 times a year. So I would really like you, I forgot your name, Amanda, to really look into that. You were talking about the go no go scenarios. I think that's really a big one to consider. And then my last one was the economics guy. So I looked at it, and as I was watching it last night, the only part of the entire presentation that I shook my head was yours, and the reason I did was just basic data. For utilities, we know that for every megawatt, there's 2.1 employees. In your model, you had 150 megawatt solar farm, but you only had 8 or 30 total employees. I think that was, that was not really, apples to oranges or apples to apples. That was kind of skewed, I believe.
If you're including some of the manufacturing jobs associated with the...
Yeah, but we know in reality, Moapa, next to Las Vegas, they had over 100 people build that. It wasn't, that was a 200 watt.
I have another study where we look at the jobs from extracting resources from the ground clear through the operation of the solar panels, and that does more, it breaks it up so you can see how many jobs are coming from fuel production, manufacturing, and construction, and operation.
Yeah, I looked at, I did look at some of
The
those.
ones that I talked about last night was just the operations jobs.
Okay.
Just operating.
All right, yeah, I think if you do come to Northern Cheyenne, I would like you to really clearly convey, because you have a little K truck compared to a big old mining haul truck. You know, I didn't like the comparison between that, and I don't think you know, a lot of these people that are sitting here are my friends, and they don't understand that. And I think it would be better, and I would like it if you would show more accurate, more to scale comparisons.
Yeah.
And that's all I had to say.
I'd like to learn more about. I'm not familiar with the truck comparison.
Oh, the K truck, the little K truck, the only 2-seater little trucks versus the giant haul trucks. You know, that's the comparison from the power plant to the solar example that you had. It was kind of off quite a bit, and I don't think that was a really good example for solar, at least. You know, I just like more clarity next time, if you would, please. Thank you.
Can I say one little thing to my friends out there? You know, I think the future of Colstrip really relies a lot on what happens down on the reservation. I know you folks, when you don't like something, you ain't messing around. You know what I'm saying? It's an old IT, old Italian trick, and I know how it works. But in our R&D facility, when it comes to safety, talk about safety, as part of the Department of Energy, 30% to 40% of the people working on that plant, on the operations and maintenance of that plant, were Native Americans. I can name them all. I won't. But at the end of the day, we took that R&D facility, which was designed to blow up, and it did. But not a good day for old and boys and girls. The rest of them, right? Okay. We worked that project. We took it. The only one in the United States of America. We took it from a research facility to a plant that was producing 100% and commercial. The big four were using our products coming from that plant, Syncoal. It replaced a product called C-Coal because it was so finite and pure, and it was 12,400 BTUs from that. It reduced all the costs on the stuff. Okay, at the end of the day, we did that project for 12 years. There wasn't one left coal. They couldn't use the tax credit. We shut the plant down. We never had one lost time accident in that whole thing. That's what I'm proud of. And we're all part of it. So when it comes to safety, those inspectors, they don't mess around. Believe me, I'm looking for good sleep at night. Thank you.
I'm just gonna say thank you and turn it back over to Jim. I would like to talk with you, at the end to make sure we can trade information, so we can start working on what a meeting might look like. More than anything, I'm thankful for the honest dialogue and the questions. I hope that, I hope if I've said anything that has offended anyone, that was never my intent. I am very comfortable with this technology. I've lived with it for decades. I've worked with it for decades. So I'm not meaning to push my enthusiasm on you. So please give me the benefit of the doubt if you have a sour taste in your mouth from some of my answers. Looking forward to further engagements, and I'll turn it over to Jim as to what you might expect going forward.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you for attending last night and today. It's been healthy discussion, and we need to continue to do this. Just keep in mind, like I said last night, this is step 2 of probably 100 or 200 step process. And so it's very early in the process, and we'll continue to move forward on that together and look at this solution. So thank you to Christine and your folks for being here, for traveling, and of course Greg and Molly for Northwestern Energy for being here last night and stuff. So we'll take it from there, and like I said, we'll be in touch and with future opportunities for meetings and getting information out. And of course, it's a two-way street, communication-wise. I think it's been very productive that you might be able to go down to the Northern Cheyenne and explain us to a different group than what's been here. So thank you once again. Looking forward to this process, and have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.